There are moments in life when silence becomes louder than any words you could speak, when your stillness echoes deeper than any reaction, any argument, any attempt to prove your point. People underestimate the power of saying nothing. They think silence is weakness, a lack of courage, a sign of retreat. But in reality, silence is presence. It's strength restrained. It's the language of those who no longer feel the need to be understood by everyone. You've probably felt it before, that urge to respond, to defend yourself, to speak up and correct the lies or clarify your side of the story. You rehearse the words in your head. You imagine how they'll react. You convince yourself that if you just say it right, they'll finally understand, but they don't. And you're left wondering why your words couldn't fix what your heart never broke in the first place. That's when you begin to realize not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every battle is worth your peace. There's a stillness that comes with experience. When you've been misunderstood enough times, you learn that defending yourself is often a waste of energy. When you've watched people twist your words to fit their own narrative, you start valuing quiet more than clarity. When you've faced conflict not to seek resolution but to satisfy egos, you begin to ask yourself, what am I really trying to win here? And that's when the shift begins. You learn to observe more and speak less. You become a witness, not a reactor. You learn that the strongest statements are often made without a single word, not in passive aggression, not in silent punishment, but in deliberate, mindful detachment. You realize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not engage. Because when you say nothing, you're not giving up your voice, you're taking back your power. You're choosing not to enter a space where your peace will be trampled for the sake of being heard. You're no longer trying to change someone's mind, you're choosing to protect your own. This is what mindful stoicism looks like. Not emotional suppression, but emotional mastery. Not detachment from feeling, but detachment from the need to control how others respond to those feelings. It's the art of knowing when your silence carries more truth than your words ever could. You begin to notice that when you speak less, you see more. You catch the shift in tone, the hesitation behind someone's words, the insecurity hiding behind arrogance. Silence gives you vision. It clears the fog that emotion often clouds. And in that clarity, you find your footing. You realize that most people speak to be right, not to understand. They argue to defend their ego, not to seek connection. And so you stop wasting breath where there is no space for dialogue. You start valuing your energy like a currency, and you learn not to spend it in places that only give you debt in return. And people notice. They notice when you stop over-explaining, when you stop justifying, when you stop trying to prove your goodness to those committed to misunderstanding it. Your silence disrupts them more than any speech could, because it reflects something they can't control, your inner calm. Not everyone will know how to sit with your silence. Some will call it cold. Some will try to provoke a reaction. They'll say you've changed, that you don't care, that you've become distant. But what they're really seeing is someone who has stopped seeking chaos for comfort, someone who no longer mistakes noise for connection, someone who is finally protecting their mind like sacred ground. There's something almost divine in this transformation. You're no longer living to be seen, you're living to be aligned. You're not silencing yourself out of fear, you're choosing quiet out of self-respect. You're not avoiding confrontation. You're mastering the moments where confrontation becomes unnecessary. Because not every fire deserves to be fed. Some things burn out faster when you stop blowing air into them. Some people fall quiet when they realize you won't entertain their drama, and some situations resolve themselves the moment you step back and let them. This isn't apathy. This isn't bitterness. This is wisdom. It's the wisdom to know that peace is more valuable than being right. That clarity is more important than being heard by everyone. That presence, pure, still, aware presence, is a power few ever tap into. You start to carry yourself differently when you understand the weight of silence. You become less reactive, less easily swayed by the storms around you. Not because you're numb, but because you've seen what happens when you let every storm inside. You've seen the cost of constant reaction, the exhaustion that comes from always needing to respond, explain, clarify. And now you choose stillness instead. People often confuse silence with weakness because they expect strength to be loud. They expect resistance to be obvious. But true strength often whispers. It walks away without slamming the door. It pauses instead of striking back. It chooses the higher ground, even when every part of you wants to sink into the fight. And over time, you come to understand this strength not as surrender, but as evolution. You begin to notice your world changing. The chaos you used to tolerate now feels foreign. The people who thrived on your reactions start to fade from your life. Not because you chase them away, but because your silence no longer fuels their games. And what's left is space. Beautiful, sacred space. Space for new energy, new thoughts, new growth. Silence teaches you about yourself. It reveals what you truly value. It shows you the places you've outgrown, the wounds you've carried for too long, the people you've overextended yourself for. And in that honest stillness, you begin to rebuild. Quietly, slowly, stronger than before. And here's the thing. When you say nothing, you're not being passive. You're being intentional. You're choosing the moment. You're allowing yourself the grace to not react in ways you'll regret later. You're stepping into the space between stimulus and response. That space where growth happens. This is where you discover something truly rare. The ability to influence without forcing, to guide without grasping, to lead without raising your voice. People are drawn to that kind of presence, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. You no longer need to argue your worth. You no longer need to convince anyone to see you clearly. You've already done the work, and the results are beginning to speak for themselves, even when you don't. And in that realization, you become free. Free from the need to be validated. Free from the compulsion to constantly prove your goodness, your loyalty, your heart. Because now, you know that the people meant for you will never need to be convinced. They will feel your presence in your silence. They will understand your boundaries without needing a speech. They will recognize your value without performance. So when you say nothing, you are not disappearing. You are distilling your essence into something sharper, stronger, quieter. You are choosing to speak only when it adds value, not noise. You are no longer echoing the world. You are anchoring yourself within it. And here's what happens when you live this way. You gain a calm that can't be shaken, a clarity that doesn't fade under pressure, a confidence that doesn't rise and fall with others' approval. Your silence becomes your signature, not a void, but a vessel filled with meaning, restraint, and depth. Let others raise their voices to feel seen. Let them perform, defend, argue, and insist. You've moved beyond that. Your silence is not empty. It's full of choices, full of power, full of peace. This is mindful stoicism, the quiet courage to remain centered, the strength to resist reaction, the wisdom to understand that sometimes when you say nothing, You say everything